Let's push ahead now with our Big Four midseason report. We're going to start it in Winston-Salem with Steve Forbes and the Demon Deacons of Wake Forest. Right now, fellas, the Deacs are 11-4 overall, a perfect 2-0 in a young AC season. They've won their last two games, and they are 1-4 in quad one games. So they're right on the periphery right now of being relevant on the national stage. What does everybody think about Wake Forest? Let's start with you, Dave.
Well, I'm intrigued to ask Coach when it's his turn, his thoughts on one, and the two of you could actually elaborate on this. I'm curious, just from the writer's point of view, how communication goes between a head coach, which Coach has been for a long time, and an athletic director, which Mike was for a long time. And I love Steve Forbes personally. He's a great guy. He's media friendly. He's transparent. He's humorous. I love the guy. He's in year 5 and hasn't been to the NCAA tournament yet. And right now, the Deacs are underperforming compared to the expectations created by Hunter Salas making the NBA weight, first team All-ACC. There's from the outsider point of view, I don't need to be a coach or an AD to know that part of the conversation is, hey, Coach Forbes, year 5, Hunter decided to stay. You got to make the big dance, man. We got you this App State forward named Trayvon Spillers. You got Hunter. You got the Gonzaga transfer, Afton Reed down low. Like, it's time to kick the door down after having some NIT caliber teams. So I'm curious as to how you guys chime in on that. And from the coach's perspective, I also want Coach Keating, if you will, to elaborate on the concept of trying to win without a true point guard. Because if I boiled down what's happening at Wake Forest right now, when you look at the individual pieces, right? Cameron Hildreth is a hardworking, unafraid, in-your-face, will defend you to the death, attack the rim, get to the free throw line, hit some threes. He's a role player kind. He's not an all-ACC guy, but I'd want him on my team, right? And you got Hunter, this NBA caliber talent who might go in the first round. You have a quality big guy, Afton Reed. You have the App State transfer. He's kind of a rebounder, defender, glue guy, Trayvon Spillers. And you have some other guys. There is only one true point guard on the entire Wake roster. And just as Hubert Davis is being criticized for not having a high caliber post player, poor roster construction, some are calling it. No matter how good a coach you are, if you don't have a quality big guy, some of your options become limited. Same thing. No matter how good of a coach you are, if you don't have a functional true point guard, a lot of times the engine just doesn't work as well. The cylinders don't hit as nicely. And Tyler Johnson is a true point guard, and he was at Louisville last year. I asked Steve Forbes this exact question. He told me, paraphrasing, DG, don't worry about it. Guards are guards. And I'm like, I don't know, man. Hunter's not a point guard. And Hildreth is not a point guard. And offenses don't work as well without that guy. And sure enough, what's happening at Wake right now? They have the best defense of Steve Forbes' 5 years there. They're scratching and clawing and defending and rebounding better than they used to. Why are they no closer to the correct side of the NCAA tournament bubble? Because their offense is a mess on some nights. It was just great against NC State the other day, but for the season, it has not been a good Wake Forest offense. And the last thing I would like to see from afar is a really good guy like Steve Forbes faceplant in year 5 because he was caught without a point guard when he certainly had enough accessories around a functional point guard to cash in year 5 with an NCAA tournament team, which he might still, but he's going to need a heck of a regular season to pull that off.
Yeah, David, just to highlight your point, defensively rated in the top 30 of the country, offensively rated in the bottom 130. You're at 177 offensively, 29th defensive right now per KenPom. Going on the stats part of that and to kind of wrap some of those thoughts into the why. Look at their next 4 games really, because they have Duke, Carolina, Duke back-to-back at home, albeit at Miami versus Stanford, at Virginia Tech, and then the lingering Carolina game. These 4 games will dictate whether we're talking about Wake Forest even having a chance to be the proverbial Seth Greenberg at the end of the season, hey, we deserve to be in because we're in a great league and we have this gaudy record. Now they lost to Xavier by 15, lost to A&M by 13, lost to Florida by 17, lost to Alabama in an exhibition by 20. Their closest top 25 game was a loss to Clemson by 9. They haven't really been close. So let's unpack that from a guard standpoint, because especially in this game, especially in this day and age, with what's happening above them with the jacking of threes. And I think 40 just got shot in the time we took this taping to go at the NBA level. You've got three guards. You said Salas, Spillers, and Johnson. None of them are even shooting 30% from three. So if guards are guards and you're going to play in a committee, you really need those three guys to be playing off each other when they're that dynamic to be able to draw the defense to get one of them going per night. When your best player is missing 7 out of every 10, and I'll go back to the analytics that Dean Smith made famous in points per possession. If the barometer is 1, all right, and you're only coming up with 9 every 10 possessions, when your best leading scorer, if your leading scorer playing 36 minutes a game can't shoot from a guard position over 30%, your defense has to be that good. It has to be better than good. It's good enough to get them to 11-4. Is it good enough to beat proverbial bad teams right now? Teams that are struggling. Changes at Miami. You mentioned Stanford, kind of a middling team, but 1-3 in the league right now. Not making that 2 time zone change so seamlessly just yet. Virginia Tech, 6-8, bottom of the barrel. And then you have that huge matchup at home with Carolina. Now you come out of that, and if you're 15, if you win all 4 by hook or crook, now maybe you can go back and reset going into the middle of January when you really want to get to February playing your best basketball and see if Steve's made some changes to the offensive side of it with Salas, with Spillers, with Johnson. Are these guys that are going to carry them, and are these the guys who are going to live up to their expectations? Statistically, it doesn't show that way. And the original point, which wrapping all this up in, a lot of this can be rectified with a dynamic coach on the floor in a point guard position. You can overcome a lot of offensive deficiencies if you have that homegrown fifth-year guy, or if you've got that really battle-tested fifth-year transfer that's got a body on him, that has won games at other places, that has the mentality of a coach. Me personally, I always wanted to have that point guard on the floor, or at least wanted to have 2 other guards that were so much of a threat inside and out, touching the paint, making plays happen for our bigs. And I just don't know if Wake has that right now. And what they're faced with coming into 2025 is, yes, they got a win they needed to get against State. They needed to win that game. They lose that game, this thing could go south quick. So now here you are on this big 4-game stretch, and coaches say, next game, they'll Bill Belichick it to death, and that's the way to do it. But we can step back and look at them right now and say, okay, these next 2 weeks for Wake Forest really, I think, will make or break their season. And not just from the record standpoint, David. I think even if they go 2-2, even if they drop one of those first 3 and, of course, maybe lose to Carolina, it's a home game. 3-1, take those stats out. And I think 2 weeks from now, let's revisit this and let's look at their statistics as a team and individual with this. Guards are guards. Okay, if they're guards, then let's step up and be guards. There'll be a direct correlation between those results and those 3 guards for sure. And then if the defense can elevate itself and ramp itself up, which you can always do, because you don't need the ball to do that. That's an effort thing. That's a connectivity thing. I know Matt Woodley on their staff is a longtime Tony Bennett disciple. It's not a surprise they have their defense in order. But offense is going to win games at this level now with the amount of talent that's being spread around. A huge, huge upcoming 2 weeks, I think, for Wake Forest.
Mike, real quick on that point guard issue, and then if Mike wants to chime in from the athletic director point of view on that other issue, just between, what kind of conversations are Steve Forbes and John Kerry having at Wake Forest at midseason? I've known some ADs that leave their coach alone until close to the end of the season. I've known other ADs that say we have conversations every day about the expectation and all that. But the quick PS on the point guard issue, when you look at the 4 best position teams in the ACC right now, Pitt has a sophomore point guard, Jalen Lowe, that is one of the best players in this league, period. He's only a sophomore, but he's exactly the kind of guy that can make the engine go. Clemson has 2 point guards on the floor at all times. I mean, Chase Hunter's in his 5th year. Jaden Zachary is a Boston College transfer who was a 3-year starter. I believe he's in his 4th year starting at the college level. Yeah. So Brad Brownell's got 2 of those brainiacs that coach is describing on the floor much of the time together. Carolina, of course, has Elliot Cadeau, who has his faults, but is insanely creative and very smart most of the time, and a wonderful ball handler. So 3 of the top 4 ACC teams have exactly what you want at point guard. And that's why I was surprised by Steve Forbes' answer, guards are guards. Well, take a look at their assist turnover ratio. Hunter Salas and Cameron Hildreth and Tyler Johnson. None of them have a 2-to-1 ratio, much less what you love to see. And some of the best point guards in this league have 3-to-1 or better. Duke is different. They're handling point guard in a very unconventional way this year. Believe it or not, Cooper Flagg, their 6'9" guy, leads the team in assists. So they're not doing the traditional point guard thing. But the Blue Devils have so much talent, it might not matter. Wake is really getting hurt for now by that guards are guards approach. And maybe they can figure it out. But for now, those pieces are not fitting together in a healthy, productive, efficient way.
As far as the AD and the head coach talking, and Kerry, I'll go to you. Man, when I didn't talk to my coach, that meant that I'd pretty much moved on. And but it also differs. I mean, when I had Pat Kennedy as my head coach at Towson, I wasn't talking to Pat a lot because I knew he was gone at the end of the year. When I had Pat Scarry as my coach, who I hired away from Pitt, I talk to Pat every day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. Sometimes it's just the relationships that you have going. But I mean, they know what their metrics are, and they had to know what the metrics were. No matter who the coach is, you know what your metrics are heading into the season. I don't know a lot of guys who are, just out of the blue flipping the entire grading system on a coach. What's your experience been?
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. I mean, as a head coach, you have to, and even more so now than before, have a ongoing daily relationship with your athletic director. You have to, especially at a school that is basketball driven, if you will. But even if it's a football school, a high level school, you still have to have that. I mean, I grew up with an athletic director with my father, and I remember he taught me that lesson every day before he left the office. Every day, no matter what. He stopped into PJ's office. What do you need? Did something come up today? Because I don't know. I'm running these other 15 sports. Did anything come up today? What do you need? I'm here to help you. What do you need? And you have to have that relationship. And, my dad saved PJ's job twice, and he wasn't going to go any other way because he knew where PJ stood. Now you look at a guy like John, young AD, somewhat dynamic, bit at high levels, trying to really make something of this. And I'm sure he sits there and thinks, how are we going to survive the aforementioned issues we just talked about, right? This financial burden that's going to come down on a private school in a basketball-centric place, neighboring the wealth of talent in the SEC right now, where he's been. Steve is one of those guys that's very well respected in the coaching community and can coach and has proven that he can coach. It's going to be interesting to see, and we won't know until we directly ask the question or you get the answer given to you. If they're not talking about this right now, how they're going to make that transition, assuming that they don't make the tournament this year, given what's up on the wall right now. Obviously, if they do, you're back in that same position where it'll take a really, really bold AD to say he's not going to be our coach next year. Or the AD realizes this is short term and that extension really isn't an extension. And I'm going to hit the transfer portal and go someplace else and give myself a new life someplace. There's more of an opportunity to do that than ever before if you're Steve Forbes. You just never really know. But the results will speak for themselves. And I think the results will start to speak this month if there's more rumblings about that in Winston-Salem. If all of a sudden these next 5 games turn into 1-4 and now it's like, oh man, then you got players and now you're starting to talk about where are we going now? And the portal's opening up here. Like, there's just so many extenuating factors. But look at the 5 years and the extenuating factors that he's had to deal with. Obviously, everyone dealt with COVID and the transfer portal, and then the 6th year, and then the rich staying richer when a place like Carolina can pick up Brady Manick and keep the big kid, Baycott, right? Like, what do you do? Like, you throw your hands up at Wake. You're like, it's just, we're just going to try to fight for that next position. They have to be talking every day, one way or the other. And I think if you're Steve, I think you have to take a more, and I think John is of that ilk that he'll appreciate the proactivity on Steve's part, one way or the other. knowing both of them, and I worked with John at Tennessee for a little bit, and obviously my dad was at Kansas when he was at Kansas State. I visited Wake a few times to go over and say hello, and I feel like he'd appreciate Steve coming to him and initiating that to take some of that pressure off, because you don't want that uncomfortable feeling when you see each other in the hallway, let alone at the games, and you don't want to be looking over your shoulder to see if the AD and who he's sitting with and what he's doing. So a lot. I can't. Maybe I'm overemphasizing it just from face value on the outside looking in, having not watched all 15 or 16 of the games. I think this 2 weeks is monumental for Steve and Wake Forest and how they approach it and what the results are.
I'll tell you one thing, Kerry, you got me laughing right there because I'm going to paint with a broad brush right here, but coaches being proactive and trying to develop a relationship with their AD, that is a needle in the haystack, brother. Because most coaches I know, when they start to lose, they retreat, they
Yep.
hibernate, they are going away. They're looking to avoid. Pat didn't want to see me because he knew, at some point, but that is a big discussion point. And for Wake Forest, let's get now quick 10-second answers. David Glenn, does Wake Forest make the NCAA tournament?
I'll say this. When I look at that soft midsection of the ACC and we try to imagine circumstances where one of those half dozen in the middle kind of rises to the occasion, puts together a really good regular season ACC record, I think the Demon Deacons are the best candidate from that midsection because of Hunter Salas, because of the other personnel we described. I even think because of Steve Forbes. They like him. They believe in him. John Kerry wants this relationship to work. There's no doubt about that. Steve Forbes is incredibly well-liked, and everybody wants him to succeed. I think they have a chance to do it as long as they steal one of those big games Coach Keating was talking about, at least one of the big ones, and then beat the lesser opponents, Miami, Virginia Tech, etc. Then you got a little wave to ride. That was a little more than 10 seconds, but that was as short as I could give you.
What do you think,
I
Kerry?
think no bad losses and at least one, if not two, really good wins. Duke, Carolina, maybe Pittsburgh stays as a good win. You've got to steal some of those quad ones early in your league, and they're few and far between right now, but you cannot have any bad losses. If you don't, I think Wake probably fills that Seth Greenberg role to the positive side and sneaks himself in so Steve doesn't have to put himself all over the media to claim why they're not in. I think they do make it in the end if they take care of business.